Hello. Money is equal to morality, which is equal to freedom. I mean that in the mathematical sense of an equation. These things are equal and not necessarily not necessarily opposite, but separate. They are distinguishable, they are different, but they are equal in every sense of the word. And this is something that can actually just be very quite easily demonstrated. You see, we'll take a look at three situations, three scenarios, one of which is the present time, the day in which we live right now, whereby the three or four major currencies of the world, which are like the dollar, obviously, world reserve currency, the euro, the pound, and the yen, and even the renminbi or the yuan, which is two separate names for exactly the same currency. Some people seem to think that the renminbi is a different currency to the yuan, the Chinese currency, basically, if you don't know that. They are all doing the same thing. They're all printing large amounts of paper money, and that paper money is unbacked. It's called fiat currency, in case you didn't know. And the other situation, the other scenario we're going to look at is England or Great Britain. When would it be? You're talking about this all started in 1920, so that's 95 years. 95 years ago, specifically for Britain. And we're also going to look at the Romans. I think, I might have this wrong, but I think it was around about sort of the 100, 200 AD or 180, 280, 280 or 380, the 100s or the 200s, I think, was when they really started to piss it all away. Now you'll understand what I mean in a second. We'll start with the Romans. The Romans originally had a very balanced, fair, structured society when it was a republic, true republic. You were only allowed to serve as a senator or as leader as the Senate or whatever for a very short length of time. It was something that almost everyone did. It's like not almost everyone, but almost every politician would serve as the leader of the Senate at some point or another. It was a great kind of balancing effect, right? And there was lots of checks and balances in the same way that the American system used to have when it first started off. And but then what happens is you get the army kicking in, and Julius Caesar becoming the first Caesar, basically the first emperor. Well, he wasn't actually technically, but everyone who followed him was, so everyone casts him as the first. And then basically, like the whole process of gaining more territory, paying the army and maintaining the army, and also maintaining any territory you seize with large amounts of men to scare the natives into submission continuously, meant that money got tight, and then all of a sudden all you need is the odd genuine crisis, like a famine or something, and or an unexpected war you weren't planning on and couldn't get ready for, and you're struggling to pay the troops. And so what happened? Well, given that back then they didn't have paper money, or they weren't using paper money. It had, I think, been invented prior to that. The Chinese invented it some many moons ago, as they often did, thousands of years ago. So paper money, the idea had been around for a while, but they were using gold and silver coin and bronze coin. And what they started to do was dilute the coins, to debase the money, right? But to do that in the sense of getting in as many gold coins as possible, melting. You say you've got 500 gold coins, you melt them down, you add just the right amount of brass or whatever other mixing metal you want to put in there, so that you then have 1,000 coins where you had 500 before, and it's only a little bit of brass in there, so it still looks kind of shiny, kind of like gold. No one notices to begin with. But then the more that as is often the case in life, when something works, when that in a payday loan or whatever it is, when some quick thing works, even though it causes you trouble, it works, so you just do it over and over again and you don't really think about it, and then all of a sudden something else happens, that unexpected thing, and then completely screws you because you've been working within a system of debt rather than a system of credit. You haven't been accumulating money and then spending it, you've been spending it and then paying for it, kind of thing. And personal expenditures, kind of thing. And so that's what they do. They go, that worked, we can do that again, and eventually it gets to the point where you've got coins that don't look very gold, they look faded, and anyone who's a saver, who's got some money tucked away under their mattress, so to speak, the Roman equivalent, will be able to say, well, this coin that I got the other day when I got given change, or when I sold a cow, doesn't look anything like this shiny gold coin that I've got here. And basically what ended up happening was, not indirectly linked to that sort of coin story, but what ended up happening was, like, the more they debased the currency, the more the morality, the general morality of the politicians, and then later the kind of citizens, just went down and down and down. Once you start to cheat with money, once you start to go, we can just fiddle it, fudge it, make it work, kind of thing. Once you do that with money, everything else seems to follow it, And one of the things is with morality that gets brought up is sexual immorality, and when it's usually brought up by psychopath fundamentalist Christians who don't even understand the book that they're fucking reading, or psychopath fucking other religions, But the point is that, like, these other religions and the Christianity and all that seem to focus on the wrong aspects of the sexual morality. It's not about saying, having sex outside of marriage is just automatically bad and blah 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 blah. No, it's about saying that there is no such thing as consequence-free sex. Like, I'm not saying that means you can't have one-night stands or anything like that, and I'm not saying that all of the consequences are going to be bad. I'm not saying there's no such thing as sex without bad consequences. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that sex has consequences. Like, and once again, you automatically, I can see it, like, I do it as well. So, what do you mean? Consequences. Consequences just mean, you give a little bit of yourself to someone when you have sex with them. You really do. You can't do that without giving a little bit of yourself to someone, and it depends on what type of sex it is and how both people feel after the sex has been had. That depends on what part of yourself you've ended up giving it, like, it's one of those things. The point is that simply, people are free to sleep with whoever they want, but when you stop being honest with the person you are sleeping with right now, but you start sleeping with someone else, that's a problem. That's always a problem. That's always a moral issue. Like, I have the right to choose who I have sex with, but I also have the right to know that if the person I'm having sex with is having sex with other people, then I have the right to know that, because it might affect my decision on whether I want to be with that person, kind of thing. We've gotten too used to the whole cheating thing. It's not really a good thing to be doing. There's understandable reasons why you might. There's definitely understandable reasons why you might, but there's understandable reasons why you might, smash a room up, but that doesn't necessarily make it okay. It's understandable. Mom just died, or something really severe, and someone smashes a room up, and you just back off and wait for it to calm down, basically. But that doesn't stop the action being a bit shit. And so that's the kind of morality that fades. It's the kind of, like, fucking working, like being sneaky and stuff, and thinking, it doesn't matter because, no one actually gets hurt. Well, yeah, actually someone does get physically and someone gets emotionally hurt, and, it's the because that's what it does. That's what the debasing money basically leads to, the attitude of, well, as long as it works for me. It allows that attitude to grow and to harbour and to, as long as it's good for me, then that's okay. And that's where society starts to kind of lose the glue that keeps you functioning, And that's why, even though, a lot of sexually free people hate to admit it, that's why some of the most genuinely moral people are religious people, It's not that they're better because they've only had their partner they're married to, or whatever the case may be, or that they don't sleep with other people. It's more that they're just that not doing that means that they've got time to focus on the right things, which is just like the cohesion of it all, keeping us all together, that we are essentially all one, And you don't have to believe in God to believe that at all. Like, there's a lot of shit where people think it's an issue of, do you believe in God or not? And it's not even. Atheists come along, like I'm not at all saying that there has to be a God and blah 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 blah, or anything like that. When I speak like in those terms, either there is a God and we are the highest sort of creation that we're aware of in this universe. There might be others, but we don't know who they are or where they are. And so either there's a God and then we are the sort of most complex of his creations, or her creations, or its creations, or there is no God, this is all an accident, in which case we are still the highest point at the fucking brain complexity chart. So, and there's nothing. And if that is true, then that also means that the same is true. Like we are all equal amongst each other. We are all fucking brothers and sisters. We all must have some kind of a common source. And so, when the morality of a nation is debased, so is the freedom. The freedom of the powers that should not be will always become more restrictive in these times. Because it becomes essential for them to keep the populace docile. Because, as I said about the coin thing earlier, people notice this shit. This stuff doesn't. It happens. Like the morality goes down and the freedom goes down and the money gets debased, but that doesn't mean, and people go along with it, and when I say people I mean the populace, the masses go along with it, but that doesn't mean it goes unchallenged and nothing gets said. And so therefore the freedom to speak up and to try and do something, or even just create an option that gives an alternative to a certain situation, is come down upon by the powers that should not be. And this is, like I say, remember I'm talking about Roman times, and this all happened. It became increasingly draconian with laws and increasingly like put on free games for the free things at the Colosseum to entertain the masses, and so like basically there is no sex without freedom from consequence. But as long as you understand that all that means is it's like, once again, it all comes back to natural law. Simply treat people as you want to be treated, or as Mark Passio taught me via his wonderful lectures, which I would recommend you check out, that is better. That is a phrase better stated in the apophatic, which is to say that it's better to state what it is not rather than what it is. And so instead of saying do to others as you would have done to yourself, as Mark says, you might be a BDSM freak and like being tortured and having hot pokers popped on your skin. That doesn't mean you should go do it to other people just because you like it, but it is fair to say, do not do to others that which you would not want done to yourself, because most people agree that they don't want this done. Once again, there might be a little bit of room, but in general that it makes it a lot more clearer. A lot clearer, not a lot more clearer. I hate people doing that, and I don't know why I did that. Anyway, so, yes, and so honest money in gold and silver terms is just non-debased, or at least there might be a debased. You might debase it in the sense that the coins might not be pure, but as long as that's just straightforward, the way it is, you don't mess with it, that's that. You have this amount of silver, right, we'll mix it with a bit of that, then you just give this amount of coin, there we go. Well, that's the silver and gold way, and the money way is the way we're more familiar with, which is For Britain, it was 1920, and for America, it was, well, Britain, it began in 1920, ended in 1947, and for America, it all started in 1971. And that is, we'll start with America. After the Second World War, there was an attempt to create a kind of something called the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was a kind of gold standard. It wasn't pure gold standard where every penny of every currency was backed by the gold kind of thing. It was the idea was that like it would be a certain degree of back, like 40 or 60% or something would be backed, and that would give a little bit of wiggle room. And that lasted a few years and then stopped lasting. And what the basic result of the kerfuffle that happened after that was the Americans were still backed by gold, and they said, listen, you guys, rest of the world, can back your currency with our currency, and we will have the gold. And also, because of this, we can look after your gold if you so want. If you want, we can do that. And so quite a lot of countries went, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea. You know, it's safer than America. And this led to an expression which was the dollar is as good as gold. You know, it's as good to have dollars as your savings as it is to have gold, which is based on an ancient and well-established understanding that gold is money. And the reason gold is money, see, I actually disagree with Mark on this, because Mark is focused, and I don't criticize him for this at all, but this is just the plain facts of the situation. Mark is focused on the outcome, on the where we are going, and the fact that for humanity to really progress, we'll have to get to a stage where we get beyond money, where they simply recognize that there is human ability and there is human need. And if we simply apply those principles, then money will become obsolete. And he's right, but that's kind of the last piece to fall into place, if you know what I mean. Of all the things that need to happen, that's the last one, and until then we're going to have to use money, so we might as well understand it and think about it correctly, or at least in a way that is not obviously logically flawed, which a lot of the modern economics is obviously logically flawed, because their attitude is, how do you get out of debt? Well, you print more money, you basically create more debt. It's just ridiculous. It's the most stupidest. That's how we're still in this fucking shit after all these fucking major crashes and stuff years ago. We're still basically hobbling along. And so the Americans said, we've got gold, there we go, right? And everyone went, right, okay, there's our gold to look after, stick it in Fort Knox or in the Fed in New York, and that'll be that. And then what happened was, in 1971, Nixon realized that there was not enough gold. They'd basically been fucking around printing too much money, printing too many dollars, and they didn't have the gold to back it. And he realized that because also the French president, I can't remember his name, I'll try and remember it, but the French president at the time, he was the big famous war general from the Second World War, and he went on to become Prime Minister of France. He'd made a public speech to the French stating that he'd done the maths, and the Americans didn't have the gold to back up their dollars, all the dollars in the world, and that the France should get its feckin' gold back as soon as possible. And because of that, Nixon had to close the gold window. He had to stop the dollar being on a gold standard, because if he hadn't, there would have been a major trouble. If there'd been a run on the gold of the Americans had in exchange for dollars and so on, and then they would have just been absolutely screwed. And so he had to close that window. And from then on, they very quickly arranged it so that they had the petrodollar, where it's kind of what it is now, but it's not really, which is the principle that they got Saudi Arabia and the oil producing countries to agree to buy all of their gold and silver, to sell all that oil in dollars, no matter who they were selling to. That forced every country on the planet that wants to buy oil, basically every country that doesn't produce its own fucking oil, needed to have dollars. And because that made it the world reserve currency, it made it the currency that everyone needed to have, the international currency. That pretty much made it the international currency for loads of other things as well. Because if you're setting up a business and you're selling internationally, it doesn't matter what you're selling, it's probably going to be easier pricing it in dollars. It's easier for you, it's easier for the people you're dealing with, you're trading with. And so then we got the petrodollar, but essentially that meant that the from then on the dollar wasn't backed. And then since then they've gone absolutely fuckwit crazy printing money. Massive debasement of the currency. I mean, I think basically the purchasing power of the dollar in the last 100 years has dropped. Basically in the last 100 years, because that's when the Fed was created, and that's when they started printing money, as opposed to having just pure, basically before that, when you had a bit of paper which said it was $20, it was a gold or silver certificate, and it would actually say on it gold or silver certificate, because you could go into the bank and say, give me the gold coin and give me the silver coin, and they would go, yeah, okay. And then when the Fed came out, that went, and nothing's backed, even though they have gold reserves to back the currency at large. That was when they stopped making the notes actually certificates of an object, which is the beginning of the debasing kind of thing. And then once the 1971 happened, that's when it really started to debase, because then there was nothing backing it at all. They had no intention of backing it with the gold. They still said, we've got this gold, which everyone thinks they've sold now, so do I. So yes. And then England. With England, Britain, it started in 1920. After the Second World War, we'd basically fucked ourselves, bankrupt ourselves. We got a loan from America to keep ourselves going, and one of the only ways we could keep ourselves going is to take the silver currency. In fact, I've got some here. Got some right here. Was to take... Now this is a good example, because this is one that's still pure. This is still pure silver. Oh, not pure, sorry, sterling silver. And that is a half crown, so 2.5 shillings. That was the way that the money had been for many a moon. Sterling silver coinage. Well, as was the sort of common standard in most countries, to be honest with you. Most countries had their coinage. I mean, not obviously all of it, but the sort of higher up, depending on what how rich the country was. I mean, for example, England was quite a rich country, and therefore the lower than a penny fractional money was all sort of like brass and stuff, and then bronze or whatever, and the penny, and I think there might have been a 2p at one point, which was bronze. But the 3p bit was the first silver, and that was a little tiny one, and it went up. And then other currencies, that poorer countries would have sort of bronze and whatever, tin and stuff, and then that only the equivalent of the pound or whatever, the larger amount, would be a silver coin. And so Britain had to make the move to do exactly what I explained the Romans did, but in one fell swoop. The Romans did it in sort of chunks. And it got more gradual, whereas the Britain just from 1920 onwards, every coin that was made, they got as many coins back in, melted them down, redid them, but at half, so they're 50% silver instead of silver, pure silver, or 90% silver, 92% silver, which is the sterling. And that bumbled on until just after the Second World War, when we'd also, fucked ourselves financially again, and so that led to the silver being taken out completely, just no silver in our money at all. It's been cupro nickel since then. And gradually, the morality of the nation of both of these places has decreased, and gradually the sort of government intrusion or lack of freedom has increased. And now Britain and America, although they're good examples in that sense, there's also, you might be thinking, oh, well, it's not that bad. Well, yeah, you're right, it's not that bad, but it's not that bad for a couple of reasons. Britain isn't that bad because we've got, right, I don't know if you know this, but the Isle of Man isn't part of Britain. Jersey isn't part of Britain. They're not even part of the European Union kind of thing. Do you see what I mean? And like, if you want to send something from England, where I live, to Jersey, I've got to send it like international mail, proper international mail. Whereas if I'm sending something to fucking Poland, which is in the European Union, I don't. I just can send, because that, you know, I can just send that normally, kind of thing. It's the protectorates. The Crown has said, I'll protect you. And what that basically means is it's a fucking tax haven for the Crown and for all the rich fuckers from the City of London who actually run this show. Seriously, if you want to understand what's going on, like, do your research, because everyone likes to go, oh, conspiracy theory, City of London, conspiracy theory, right? It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. I can physically show that these guys have got their fingers in every feckin' pie, and it's unreal. And they use these little islands, little places around the world from the left over from the empire, these little tax havens, of which we've got a fuckload more than you would realise. There's absolutely hodds of them. Do a bit of research on them. This is actually, there's a certain degree of information I want to share and give out, but there's a certain information that I've learnt over time that if you give it to people, yeah, a couple of people might go, alright, cheers, cool, I'll check that out. What actually ends up happening is that for those 2 or 3 people, there's like 30 people on one side calling you a dick and 30 people on the other side calling you a dick about how you're wrong, and it's like, well, and you start talking and they haven't actually looked at it at all. They've just maybe heard someone else talk about it rather than actually looking at it themselves. So yeah, I would recommend you check those things out and make your own fucking mind up, basically. And so there you've got the 2 ways that money can be debased. But as I was saying, that the thing that makes Britain and America different is that Britain has these tax protectorate places, and it also, because of the City of London, is involved in international trade in a way that, even though we look to outsiders like we are not very big on the world stage as a nation anymore, as like a dominant force in the world, we are, you know, most of the fucking, see, people talk about the Jewish conspiracy, right? I'm telling you now, the people involved in the high-level conspiracy, yeah, some of them are Jewish, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are British, English, Anglican, and this is, when it comes down to it, this is all pointless titles, because they're not actually Jewish in the sense of being religiously Jewish, or Anglican in the sense of being religiously Anglican. They're all fucking either atheist or Satanist. And you really need to understand Satanism if you want to understand the modern predicament that we find ourselves in, because it really is not a case of whether you believe in God and therefore believe in Satan or at all. The point is that, in fact, Satanists will tell you that they don't believe in God. But it's about the self, it's about the worship of self, it's about what's right for me is right. What's wrong for me is wrong. Fuck what's right or wrong for you. That's Satanism. That's what these fuckers at the top believe. Modern Satanism. Check it out. Check out the 4 tenets of modern Satanism, because there's so many little mini-me Satanists, as Mark Passio calls them, and I love that term, running around. People who would, if you said, are you a Satanist, they'd be like, no, of course I'm not a Satanist. It's basically like, you know, survival is the highest law. You know, what's right for me is right for me, what's wrong for me is wrong for me, and I can't remember the other 2, but they're very kind of representative of the modern way of thinking and being and existing, and, you know, stumbling through this fucking gift we call existence. Like, I used to, I might be giving myself away here actually, but I actually printed off, posted around where I live, the town where I live, these flyers that had the words, you are alive, actually alive. You may have died before now, but you didn't. You may have never been born, but you were. You are actually alive. Isn't it fucking great? And I just stuck them around there, and I was quite pleased to see them popping up on various people I kind of news, Facebook pages and so on, saying, oh, so this isn't bad today, what the fuck, that was cool. You know, just because I think sometimes people forget. This is a fucking gift, man. Like, it's a gift. Like, yes, you might be able to make an argument that, you know, some people's life isn't a gift, some people's life is, you know, people who are born in and suffer terrible physical afflictions their whole life and so on. Yes, that might not be considered a gift, but if you've got your health, if you're an able-bodied person, then you've got no fucking excuse. And that is reinforced by the fact that so many people with disadvantage or with chronic pain manage to fucking go out and interact with the world in a way that's beneficial for the world and for them. So if you're able-bodied, you've got no fucking excuse at all. You know, this is a fucking gift. You should be grateful for every fucking second you're alive. And, you know, I used to watch Lost. There was a really good moment in an episode of Lost where Jack, who I fucking hated, by the way, I really just could not be fucking getting with him. He was a total dickhead. And Locke, who was the awesomest character to ever be created. And Locke was in the jungle, and Jack had stumbled in, and Jack was having one of his little hissy fits about struggling to deal with it all and how hard it was being, the whole scenario. And Locke, whilst sort of slicing his way through a bit of mango and eating it, points to a small creature like a butterfly or something, some kind of a winged bug coming out of its cocoon. And he says, "See that butterfly, Jack?" And he's like, "Yep." Jack goes, "Yep." Then he says, "I could pull the edge of its cocoon slightly. Just make it that little bit easier for it to get out. But if I did that, when it climbed out, it would fall to the ground and die. Because the struggle to get out of the cocoon is required by the body of the butterfly in order to get the blood pumping through and get the blood into the wings so that the wings straighten out and harden up before they start to take flight." You know, that's sometimes why the expression, you know, I think sometimes that's where the expression no good deed goes unpunished comes from. Because, you know, sometimes you try and help people and it just comes straight back at you because, you know, they didn't actually want help or need help. Maybe they needed the help in the sense that they aren't capable of doing it themselves, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to help them, kind of thing. You know, people will often just do this stuff when they are ready. You know, in the kind of classic Neo sense of, you know, when did you decide that I was to know that? And she sort of points at the wall behind him, and you know, I decided. You know, I was ready to know when I was ready to know. So anyway, yes. As I said, you've got Britain and America, both very free countries, and especially in terms of how free they are within a financial sense. You know, like, especially in America, there was no income tax until very, very recently, and that was amazingly beneficial. You know, it made it amazingly easy to be an entrepreneur. It made it amazingly easy to start up a new business. And I'm getting sick of reading about people on Facebook saying, "Oh, it's all because of capitalism," and it's not. This is not capitalism. It hasn't been for a long fucking time, and don't think it's ever really been in Britain. We're capitalist, but we're not truly capitalist. There's too many regulations and fucking bullshit for it to genuinely be a capitalist society, because you should only have regulation in terms of pollution, I believe, because I think that's the one thing that companies will sometimes just try and get away with because it costs money to get rid of polluting chemicals properly. I think you need to have observation for that, but that can be done relatively easily. It doesn't need the huge lumbering bullshit bureaucracy, mistake-making bureaucracy that only government can provide. And so America originally was genuine sort of capitalist society, and then it ceased to be. The money got too big and got too influential with the politicians, and then the great dumbing down happened. The conscious attempt to make sure as many people went to public school as possible, and make sure the public schools were working on the repetition base of knowledge rather than the trivium base, which is there's a couple of ways to express the trivium. The first is the classic, which is knowledge, understanding, wisdom. But you can also, it's also known as grammar, logic, rhetoric. Or in computer terms, it would be input, process, output. It's the basic way that actual learning happens. If you've actually learned anything in your life, which probably wasn't at school. It might have been, but it probably wasn't at school. It's probably like at another point. Say you've learned an instrument or something, then you will have gone through that process, whether you understood it or not, as you went through it. But if you understand the process, it makes the process, sort of at your fingertips. It makes it very easy to do things with the process and to use it to the best of its ability if you understand it. And that was how all education worked. The first couple of years of your education, you wouldn't sort of be learning in the sense that we learn. You wouldn't be sort of looking at books and analysing what was in the book. You'd be learning how to learn. You'd be learning how to check what a word meant and learn how to use it correctly and all this other stuff, and learn how to spell and whatever. You would learn how to learn for the first couple of years, and then you would start to learn. Which is why if you look at in America it would be the 7th grade or something, and so let's have a think. The 7th grade, so that would make you 13. So in Britain that would be like year 9. And if you look at test papers, British and American school test papers from that time, most adults, most people who are in university now in Britain and America would struggle to do well. That's how low the standards have fallen. That's how stupid they need us to be, But yet there's still enough of us out here actually going, what? Hang on a second. Not everyone's got it all right. Some people are bumbling, some people are doing better than others. But the point is that there's at least a bunch of people who are trying. And, anyway, I'm going to start to try and wrap it up now. But basically, yeah, all of these 3 examples of sort of Britain, America. Oh, sorry, I didn't finish on America. See, that was the thing. Crappy memory. America, the reason that they have been able to it's not been quite as bad as it should have been. A lot of people might be watching this and thinking, it's not that bad. It might be a bit bad, but it's not it's not completely fucked. It doesn't correlate with the amount of debasing money that's gone on. Well, the reason is because America hasn't seen the true consequences of their money debasement yet. Because all those other nations of the world required dollars, most of the dollars in existence are in existence outside the borders of the United States. So when something happens, for example, there's the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Korea, I think it is. They are a bunch of nations who've got together and said, yeah, well, we don't really need the dollar. We're big enough and we can trade with each other, and we'll do what's called currency swaps, where basically, Russia and China, the Chinese go, here's a shitload of our yuan or renminbi, and then the Russians go, right, okay, well, here's a shitload of our ruble. And then if you want to buy something off us, you've got ruble, so that's what we want to receive, and then we've got yuan for you, kind of thing. It's a great little system, and they've now got trade swap agreements, basically agreements based on that principle set up, as have quite a lot other of the BRICS nations between themselves. And these are a very, very significant proportion of the world's resources and economic and manufacturing businesses and corporations and so on, and producers. And so once and China's already started to very subtly exchange its US treasuries for this or that or t'other, or it's selling them, and Russia is as well, selling them in large amounts, but doing them in a way which doesn't kind of dump them on the market at one time and cause a panic. The Chinese are very good with that. They know fine well that the only way to get out of this situation that fucking Americans have put them in is to play a cool hand. But once, and this is an expression I like, once the herd turns, once most nation states realize that the dollar it's done with, we don't need it anymore, and once that happens, there will be consequences in and of themselves, but there will also be the dollars will rush home. People will be selling, no one will want them. No one will want to be used dollars. So the only people who are going to want to buy treasury bonds are going to be Americans, and not even they are, I don't think. But the point is that there are all these dollars that are in existence that sit in bank vaults en masse in banks like the Bank of England or the Bank of Canada or whatever. These state central banks will no longer need the money. And so they'll go and buy American stuff. They'll go and buy money. They'll go and buy commodities of some kind or another. They'll go buy sort of food or whatever. They'll buy something because they'll have these dollars and they won't want them anymore. So the only thing to do is to go to the one place that still takes them, which is America, and spend them there and then get your shit and go home. And America is going to be like, we've got all this fucking shitty paper going on here, but we can't eat it, and we've sold all our fucking land and we've sold all our resources and we've completely screwed ourselves over. All because we wanted to watch, Monday Night Football and not listen to the guy who was trying to tell us that the government were corrupt and that they were domestic terrorists. So, yes, that's that. That's why Britain is still a powerhouse behind the scenes, much more than people are aware. I think sometimes, especially Americans, seem to think that Britain's done and dusted and we're just the little lapdog of America. Well, let me tell you that the people behind the scenes have done a lot of good work to make sure you think that way. When in fact it's all part of the same little fucking boys club network, and like I say, it's got nothing to do with whether they're Jewish or not. There's a couple of Jewish people involved, like the Rothschilds, but they're not the only ones. This operation wouldn't fucking work without other influential, powerful people just who know how to stay hidden and keep their wealth hidden. That's why all through your life you heard the bullshit that Bill Gates was the richest man in the world. No, not by a fucking long shot. I once heard, saw Richard, not in person obviously, but I once saw Chris Rock, say, that we've got lots of rich black people, but we haven't got any wealthy black people. And he goes, and by the way, fucking if before you say Oprah, if Bill Gates woke up tomorrow with Oprah's money, he'd jump out a fucking window and slit his throat on the way down. And everyone laughs because it was funny. But I'd further like to say that if fucking Baron von Rothschild or the Rothschilds or the fucking Rockefellers, but specifically the Rothschilds because they've been at it for a lot longer, if the Rothschilds woke up tomorrow with Bill Gates' money, they'd slit their fucking throats and jump out the window. That's how fucking rich the Rothschilds are. So anyway, these are just 3 examples, but there are many, many more. Every single fiat currency in the history of all time has failed, apart from the ones that were in countries where that country was later invaded by someone who had a stable currency, who had, honest money, solid money. Gold and silver, and it doesn't always have to be gold and silver, but it's usually commodities based. It usually means that the money is representative of some kind of a commodity kind of thing. But it's better when you got gold and silver, because yes, silver can be used and is getting used more and more in the modern world, but back in the day they both weren't really used for that much other than jewellery, and therefore they were a good system. But that's why I disagree with Mark Passio on this whole money thing, because the thing that makes gold money is the fact that it doesn't do very much else. Most of the things that are valuable have a use and get used. Like if you use oil or corn as money, eventually someone needs to eat that, and they need to eat it before it goes off. So it only serves as money for a short period of time. You have to have a continuous supply of it. But with gold, when you give that to someone, they're not going to eat it or process it, unless it's to a jeweler. But in which case, all they're going to do is reshape it. And like I say, with silver, that's less true in the modern world, because we do actually eat silver up now, and we have been for some time. Which now means we've got less silver than we have gold. Bet you didn't know that. So yeah, basically, In modern times, silver, that happens with silver. But with gold, it still remains true that it just sits there and does nothing. And so it's perfect as money. And you're thinking, oh yeah, but we don't want to be carrying gold around again like we used to, making blah blah blah. Yeah, you're probably right. What I envision is some kind of a combination cryptocurrency, a cryptocurrency backed by gold, where, because that's eradicates the problem of oh well, you can't be carrying around these little tiny bits of gold that you might lose. You could if an ounce of gold was worth £1 million, say, or $1 million, you could easily have nanograms, digital nanograms, but there would be an actual ounce somewhere that was represented of a certain amount of nanograms, and each nanogram would have a number which led to exactly which ounce it was. And if you had all the nanograms of that ounce, you could maybe go and retrieve it from the bank or something like we used to have. If you had that million, you could go get that coin or whatever. I'm just using $1 million as a round figure to show even if an ounce was just ridiculously expensive based on what our current pricing system is, which is completely fraudulent and suppressed anyway. Don't need, check out GATA if you don't believe me on that. GATA is an organisation who've been demonstrating very, very easily that there is massive gold and silver manipulation for years, keeping the price down. And so so that's the crack basically. Gold, silver, or honest money, and fiat always fails every single time. And it's the only thing that makes this time different. What's going on right now is that every other time a fiat currency has collapsed, it's been an independent nation, like a state of its own, and it's collapsed, and its problems have been limited to its own borders because of the double-fold move of all of the countries of the world, pretty much, apart from the couple like South Korea and whatever, who use the dollar to back their currency, North Korea, have all those people made that move, added to the fact that later Nixon took off the gold standard, means that every country, when the dollar collapses, every country will suffer. Every country's currency will go through the fucking what the fuck. Most likely we'll get hyperinflation. If you don't know what that is, you want to check out what happened to the Weimar Republic, which was basically Germany immediately after the First World War, where they were forced to repay the costs of war to the other sides, and the repayments were set so high that they literally couldn't afford it, and so just printed the money and it got to the point where prices rose steadily, as is always the case. Exponential growth is what happens, which means that to begin with, it's like everything's doubling, but the numbers are so small that they're insignificant. Like, it's a double from 2 to 4 is 4 to 8, 8 to 16, but it doesn't take long till you're in the hundreds, and then if you represent it on a chart, it always goes like, it always just reaches a point where then it goes bang straight up. And at that point, prices are like doubling almost like overnight. I mean, there was a story I read about the Weimar Republic where there was a guy who he basically bought a bottle of champagne at a restaurant one night, and the following morning the glass from the bottle was worth more money than the bottle of champagne had cost, full of champagne had cost the night before. That's the kind of fuck. And then there was a kid who was a bellboy in a hotel, bought the hotel off the owner for 1 gold coin. And it would not have been even a whole ounce. Gold coins are usually kind of, sort of about 8 grams at most when you're talking about the currency of the nation, as opposed to the modern idea of having like a big, that's silver, but having like a big chunky 1 ounce coin kind of thing. And so yes, I think we'll wrap it up there. That basically covers the principle, which is, as the money supply of a nation is debased to a certain degree, so the morality of that nation will be debased also by an equal degree, and also will the freedom of that society be debased by an equal degree. And as I said, this is, if you look at any society that has gone through the process of debasing the currency, whether that was with gold or silver or money, with fiat currency, and check out what happened to the society immediately afterwards. I mean, that the whole I think it's salacious, indulgent side of Roman society went absolutely apeshit immediately after the started debasing the currency. And the Roaring Twenties was the beginning. People talk about the sexual revolution being the 60s. It wasn't, especially in Britain. It was the 20s. That was when, girls of good repute started to sleep around, and that's when the drugs really came in. And don't get us wrong, I'm not saying like I say that having sex out of wedlock is a problem, or that even drugs are a problem. But what I'm saying is that they are often present when immorality is present. They are not necessarily an indicator of immorality, but they can often be there when immoral fucking selfish actions are. And so, as I said, that's the wrap up, and hope you enjoyed this little ramble about freedom and money and morality. Thanks. Bye bye.